Getting ready to start the program right now, and I want to thank everyone for coming out to St. Peter's Episcopal Church for this Real Detroiters Speak Out event, and we'll be here for a couple of hours, and more people will be coming in. After we finish today, we're going to caravan down to the Western Cadillac to do a solidarity action with members of Navier Local 24, who have been on strike now for 3 weeks. It's pretty outrageous that they're just asking for perhaps $2 more an hour, some involvement in the technological changes that have been made in the hotel system, and just better working conditions. A pathway to a full-time job for people who are temporary employees. We all support that, and we should be, doing more to support them. We've been going down as part of what's going on now and joining them in the rallies, and they've been very, very disciplined over the last 3 weeks. But obviously, Marriott International, which is the parent company, the largest hotel chain in the world. These people have billions upon billions of dollars, and with the corporate tax cuts that was introduced last year by the current administration, these people are flush with cash, and they could give the workers a few more dollars every 2 weeks. It's just amazing what's going on in this country. They're striking, I believe, in 7 or 8 different localities throughout the United States. So we're going to definitely be in solidarity with them as well. I want to thank the pastor here for opening up the church to us for this event. It's not a new place for myself or Moratorium Now Coalition. We've been here on many, many occasions with the previous pastor who was here as well. Okay, so we want to bring up Pastor Denise Riegler right now and give us an introduction, and then we'll hear from the retired pastor, Bill Riley Kellerman, and then I'll introduce our sheriff for this afternoon. That will be Mrs. Yvonne Jones. So let's have a warm welcome to Pastor Riegler.
So I opened up my little notebook where I made some notes, and I realized that the bookmark that I had on the page open was General Baker. Picture him saying, "Our task is to make thinkers out of fighters and fighters out of thinkers." You're in the right place. We're in the right place. Thank you for that. So to this teach-in where real Detroiters can speak out, listen, teach, deepen what we already know, and keep weaving and telling and insisting on our own story in this place where the powers that be tell us that there is one Detroit, but we know something different. So, welcome to St. Peter's. So I'm new and I'm not new here, so I just started as pastor here about 7 weeks ago, and but I probably most of you know that I married the retired pastor. So I've been around for a little while, but I'm new in this role. And what I want to say is that in the 7 weeks that I've been here, I'm witnessing gentrification on steroids and capital ways. I mean, we're seeing all of these lofts go in, we're seeing the transformation or something of this corner, we're seeing, oh man, gentrification on steroids, and people feel squeezed, right? And so the importance of this place is about holding space for people in the midst of all of this, right? So we are holding space here for Man and Meal Kitchen, and there's over 100 people eat here every morning, and we keep serving as a water distribution station in the face of the water shutoffs. Hold space in our peace and justice high for the people of Detroit and for Michigan peace teams. This is a place that was really sort of central organizing for Poor People's Campaign
out in front of the City Hall, opposing the illegally engineered bankruptcy of the city of Detroit beginning in the summer of 2013. We also had a lot of picket lines out in front of the federal courthouse on Lafayette, downtown. And she has been with us ever since then, making a profound contribution to the Moratorium Now Coalition. She's a co-founder of the Detroit Active and Retired Employees Association, whose president is also here, Mr. Bill Davis, who's also police commissioner for the city of Detroit. Yvonne is a fighter, she's a struggler, she's a family woman as well, a community activist and organizer. So she is someone who is making a profound contribution to the city of Detroit. So let's have a warm welcome for Yvonne Johnson.
Thank you all so much. I just want to say a few words about before we start our panel, the City Lab purpose, so that we can see how we have to help them. You know, they have a lot of information, and these are their words taken from their website. City Lab is funded by Michael Bloomberg to support U.S. cities at a time when they face steep challenges and when the nation needs them to power solutions that move the country forward. By bringing together city leaders and top minds in urbanism and city planning, economics, education, architects, public sector innovation, community development, and business convening with the goal of creating scalable solutions to major challenges faced by cities everywhere. And the three key things they have is promoting a bold leadership and effective problem solving, supporting critical policy action, encouraging artists, residents, entrepreneurs to uplift cities and solve problems. So these are the people that are looking forward to making solutions. But I say we have the solutions to the city's problems. We talk about them every week. And I don't know if they got in touch with anybody that's in this room, because I know these are some of the private minds and the most active people that I know. And so I'll say that maybe when we finish, we can take them some notes to help them out. But we'll start off with our slogan, how will we change things? Make the banks pay.
Make the bank pay! Make the bank pay!
So we're going to start off with our first one. We're going to start off with the retired pastor here, and his name is, and you guys are all familiar with him because we see him everywhere we are. He's there with us. And so his name is Bill Wilder Kemperman, and he's going to give us an overview.
Actually, I wanted to say something quickly about the Poor People's Campaign and the Gilbert 7 action. You may know that in May and June there were 6 direct actions, 5 of which were in Lansing. The last of which at Mishka, where we blocked the doors there, simultaneous with Moratorium Now having a sit-down meeting upstairs about the TARP funds, the hardest hit funds. The 6th action was here in Detroit, and we picked Campus Martius and Dan Gilbert as a focus for that action. We started at Detroit Water and Sewage, marched to Campus Martius. People, including Reverend Riebler, took water by the bucketful out of the fountain there. blocked the doors to Quicken Loans, the main door, and we shut down the queue line in both directions at that intersection. All of these things kind of happening simultaneously. The Poor People's Campaign has a goal to break the dominant narrative in this country and which silences poverty and poor people. And in Detroit, that's a matter of making Detroit great again. And Dan Gilbert is emblematic of that. So let me say just a few quick things, some of which I'm indebted to Moratorium for their work in pulling some material together. Gilbert's a multi-billionaire, worth $6.2 billion, and owns some 100 buildings in Detroit, one of which he paid $142 million for, and others of which he paid $1 for. He co-chaired the Blight Task Force, surveying the city and designating buildings for demolition, and that's where the hardest hit funds to keep people in their homes got used. Half of that in Michigan got used to demolish homes. His Quicken Loans did subprime predatory mortgages. They're under indictment lawsuit by the Justice Department. Yet unresolved, they foreclosed on 1,800 homes, half of which are now blighted or abandoned. The queue line that we blocked was built at a cost of $144 million, and in a lot of ways it's emblematic of the downsizing of the city, the Woodward Corridor, and the expelling of people from other neighborhoods. It costs $6 million a year to run while bus lines to neighborhoods are being shut down. Within view of our action is the Hudson's site where Gilbert has gotten $618 million in tax abatements, tax incentives to build $1 billion skyscraper. So 60% of it from funds that would in Detroit go to city services, public education. All of those are going directly into his pocket and into his building. Though we were arrested by Detroit police officers, Campus Martius is kind of emblematic of both the corporate privatization of policing in Detroit with their own armed security in Campus Martius and electronic surveillance centered in the Quicken Loans building and the data center here in Corktown that he built. The courthouse in which the 7 of us who blocked the queue line, and we're calling ourselves the Gilbert 7, the courthouse in which we're going to jury trial, he has made a deal to move that courthouse and Frank Murphy and the jail to demolish that and move it all out into another $1 billion 4-building place, which also gets a lot of black folks out of downtown and up 75 to Warren. The 7 of us are appearing in front of Larry Williams, the prosecutor, who was the prosecutor also for the Heinrich 9, wants to do 7 separate jury trials for each of us. This is an old story we've heard before. It'll certainly be consolidated. We don't have a date yet, but we'll keep you informed. Meanwhile, Tuesday morning in Lansing, people who blocked the doors to the to the Department of Health and Human Services, they're not going to trial, but they're pleading no contest and making statements on the record. There are, I think, 15 or so folks from that action who will be in court on Tuesday, 9:30 in the morning, 54th District Court, if you want to join that. I join the niece in saying thank you for being here. I'm glad you're in this
but for their activeness and their support to the cause. We're going to move right into our panels, and our first topic is housing. And we're going to start with a couple of amazing young organizers. I'm going to call them up. Jonathan Roberts, organizer, anti-foreclosure worker, 1500. Jonathan single-handedly decided to take on foreclosure and build up a group of wonderful organizers, and also establishing a strong relationship with the communities of people who are faced with foreclosures, and taking on City Hall not shaking it off, and we love them for that. Also, Adele Hawkins is a League of Detroit, and she's been a leading organizer in 1500 anti-foreclosure campaign this summer. At this point, we're gonna turn it over to our housing foreclosure activists.
Thank you for everyone your support and for coming to this event. I think it's important to, especially in these times, highlight the contradictions that exist in our own city. So as we have this national conference to talk about renovation and urban renewal, we have hundreds of thousands of people who have been violently displaced from their homes. We have people who were defrauded by mortgage institutions, by banks, by their own city government, by county officials, and there is no recourse for them. So when we talk about Detroit, I think we have to frame it as a tale of two cities, because we live in a bifurcated community where on the one hand you have this burgeoning paradise for the wealthy and agents of capital, but for the working class, i.e. the actual community of Detroit, it is quickly becoming a hell. So one of the most violent things that can happen in a city like Detroit is displacement, housing displacement. I can't think of anything more inhuman than taking families and mothers and children out of their very basic right to shelter, because we seek development instead of seeking human fulfillment of our communities. And I think it's important to trace where this trajectory comes from. It comes from a global project, austerity, right? Austerity politics, which is characterized by mass divestment from working class communities in order to fund the interests of the wealthy. And that has happened in Detroit. It happened at first, as was discussed previously, with the defrauding of residents. So Detroit used to have the highest home ownership rate for Black residents, for Latinx residents across the country. And I think that's a historical moment that we have to take, because now we are in a time where 6% of homes in our city are affordable. We're living in a time where $80,000 is the threshold for affordability, as our median income still hasn't recovered from the crisis of 2007, 2008. So thinking about the way in which the banks defrauded residents, I think we can take a lot of lessons from it, because they're doing it again today. So what they did was train people to go into communities, to canvass communities, right, very effectively. And if they saw a roof that needed repairing, they would go up to that family and say, well, if you take out a new mortgage or you refinance, we can help you fix your roof. If people had medical expenses, if people had family members who needed urgent help, you had people with 2, 3, even 4 mortgages in this city. And this wasn't something that was done without consideration for race, because 89% of mortgages given to Black families in Detroit were subprime, and subprime is just a sanitized way of saying fraudulent.
That's right.
So when the bubble finally bursts because you are overvaluing the cost of homes in a city, because you are forcing this financial burden onto hundreds of thousands of residents, immediately we had 67,000 residents lose their homes from mortgage foreclosure. And at the same time, we had almost $1 trillion in interest-free money being given to banks, on top of a $600 billion plus bailout package to banks. So when they talk about not having money for affordable housing, what they're really saying is that we don't want to invest in affordable housing. I think we have to move away from this concept that we are poor. No, we have been robbed. And the fundamental tenet of austerity is that the rich steal from the working class and then sell back to the working class what they took from us. That is the development of the city of Detroit. And not only did we have mortgage foreclosures, but after we had a crisis that was created by these private institutions, then our own government, our city government, decided to use fraudulent evaluations and assessments of our property to charge people 3 or 4 times what their property was actually worth. So we had people who have homes that were actually worth about $10,000 getting property taxes every single year for $8,000 or $9,000. Imagine in the suburbs with these homes that are worth $300,000, $400,000. If they got property taxes for $200,000 a year, I think we would hear about that.
Yes.
Yes.
But because we're dealing with a city like Detroit, the problem becomes invisible, which means that in only a decade, we live in a time of mass natural disasters and governments who are unwilling to help people. But in a decade, because of both private and governmental policy, we have displaced more people in the city of Detroit than Hurricane Katrina displaced in New Orleans. And that's something that Dan Gilbert, that's something that Duggan will never talk about, because that displacement was necessary for them to build sites like the Hudson downtown. Now, the work that we've done with the kind of initiative and movement campaign, 1500 Detroit, is to fight and confront this idea that occupied foreclosures are a thing that needs to happen in our community. Obviously, the foreclosures themselves are the problem, and we can tackle those, but we can't talk about urban renewal and revitalization as we continue to kick out and rob 1,500 families every single year. And this is the lowest point, right? 1,500 is a low number for Detroit. It was as high as 40,000 certain years. So before we can talk about renewal, we have to stop the problem. And part of that problem, a large part of it, is occupied foreclosures. So we confronted a city government that was not only unwilling, and Doug can tell you more about this in the meetings, they weren't only unwilling to help families that were being defrauded by their government, but they actually were ignorant of the own process of displacement. So you had the mayor who didn't even understand how a foreclosure worked, but he is somehow allowing and financing these nonprofit groups to go in. And that's another key aspect of austerity, is that we expand the scope of philanthropy. Philanthropy is not to replace public infrastructure, but in a city like Detroit, where we take it for granted that our infrastructure will remain poor, we allow our public dollars to be given to private entities instead of strengthening our own public infrastructure. So, because of the work that we did, both canvassing, doing direct actions to the mayor, to the county, having meetings with statewide officials, we managed to double the number of homes that were kept from going to auction. But we won't stop until the auction itself is stopped. Because the auction is just a manifestation of the evil that is capitalism in our communities. And I'll end with this. The Hudson site, I read about how they're framing the development of that site again, well over $600 million. Instead of funding our schools, where we know we need $500 million to fix the lead problem in schools, we're going to give that money to billionaires. But what they're saying about the Hudson site is they want it to become a city within a city. So I think we're dealing with liars, but sometimes we have to take their words for what they are. They want to construct a city within a city. They want to make it so that you never have to leave the 2 or 3 square miles that they have designated for development. As there are rows upon rows of homes that have been blighted and abandoned, not because poor people or black people are lazy or don't want to work or don't pay taxes, but because they were robbed by their own government. So our fight is not just for downtown. Our fight is for every single square mile of this 140 square mile city. And until every community is liberated, until every community has the right to affordable housing, we won't stop our struggle, and we won't stop our fight. So, what do we want? We want justice. We want a lot of things, but we want justice. So what do we want? When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! If we don't get it, shut it down! If we don't get it, shut it down! If we don't get it, shut it down! And if we don't get it, shut it down!
Oh, this isn't right. I shouldn't have to follow that. Jonathan is incredible. So earlier this summer, I got involved with the 1500 campaign, right as Jonathan and another local organizer, Julia Cossum, were starting to do canvassing. They were interfacing a lot with the nonprofit United Housing Coalition, which was the nonprofit that was given the job of helping people with these buyback plans. So, as Jonathan said earlier, the city got sued for all these illegal tax foreclosures that they've been doing for well over a decade. Not just the city, but Wayne County and the Michigan Housing Development Authority as well, or MISHDA. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the nonprofit aspect, because again, in this intense time of austerity, instead of just keeping people in their homes and keeping infrastructure working, public money goes to these private companies to try to do the same thing, but obviously nonprofit is a euphemism. Someone's profiting off of it. So I met a woman this summer named Tracy, whose house was already in foreclosure as of last year. She went to the United Community Housing Coalition to get help. They said that she needed to pay $1,500 to keep her house from going to the auction block. Well, what they said was, okay, if you work with us, we'll help you buy the house on the auction block. They wanted her to pay $1,500 of back taxes. She didn't have that. She was injured. She was on disability. She didn't have that money. So instead, the house went to auction. It got bought by this LLC called Amarus out from Miami, and they bought it for $500. And they bought scores and scores of properties in Detroit for much less than what private citizens were expected to fork over to pay back taxes. So that's a cruel, and it's cruel, it's awful, and it's
Criminal.
still going on.
It's criminal.
Criminal, absolutely, it is criminal. I still am trying to interface. So she wants to try to buy that house back from this private company who bought it for way less than what she was being asked for. But these companies, a lot of them don't even have like their own phone number that you can reach them. So there's another company that's called Enterprise Resources or something vague like that is the only contact that I can get. So it's criminal, it's shady, everything that's been happening. But yeah, I mean, to talk a little bit about interfacing with city officials, like Jonathan said, we were trying to work with people. A lot of them are working in the Detroit city government. They're not from Detroit if they're on the lower level. We were approached. We went to this community meeting where we did the shut it down chant, which got Mike Duggan really furious, but one of his top aides, Alexis Wiley, approached us and she said, "Oh, it's such a shame that these great ideas that you young people have are getting filtered out." Well, no, moratorium now has been on the city's asses for a decade, trying to get them to release the hardest hit funds. There is money to keep people in their homes, and the city government, Wayne County, and MSHDA working together refused to release these hardest hit funds to the people who need it the most. Instead, Duggan brags about his blight authority and how many more houses he has boarded up, like that's some kind of accomplishment, as if it wouldn't have been better just to keep people in their homes in the first place. He never talks about that when he's bragging about all these boarded up houses. But yeah, so we had a few meetings with the city, and they're always passing the buck, telling oh no, you gotta talk to city, no, you gotta talk to MSHDA, no, go back to Wayne County. It was a bit of an accomplishment that we even managed to get some of these different entities sitting together in the same room so that it wouldn't be as easy for them to pass the buck. We managed to meet with someone from MSHDA to making these programs that are available in theory to help people stay in their homes, but the application processes for Step Forward, for the poverty tax exemption, are made so difficult that the people who need it the most, it's the least accessible to. I think something like, 80% of people in Detroit who apply for PTE don't get it. And it's not that they're not deserving of it, but the application itself is so onerous that people don't know how to fill it out. They ask for so much documentation that a lot of people just don't have. These are generational homes. Not everyone still has the deed. But the city should have information about billing and gas and everything. They're the ones who send out these bills, so why do people have to bring another copy back to the city who is billing them for gas and water and shutting their gas and water off? But so yeah, in theory there's help, but it's not really meant to be available. It's just something for the city to say, oh no, we're helping, and then still just keep displacing people on and on. I just want to see what, let me check my notes really quick. But okay, just to wrap up about the nonprofit and United Community Housing Coalition. They're the least bad housing nonprofit, but they're still not good. So I sat in on one of these meetings where it was a workshop to prep people to apply for this lawsuit, but also poverty tax exemption so that they don't have to keep paying these illegal taxes. But they never mentioned the word that their taxes are illegal because their homes were overassessed, because they're getting money from Dan Gilbert and Chase and the people who engineered this crisis in the first place.
How much money are they getting?
How much money they're getting? Oh, only like $1 million. Not even. I mean, sorry, I don't have the exact figure. It's not a ton of money. It's $1 million, but that's enough for them to, not call out the contradictions. But Ted Phillips, I still remember this. He was telling this room of people, now people in Lansing talk shit about Detroiters and how, they just don't want to pay their taxes. Well, don't be like that. Don't give those people in Lansing more reason to talk shit about us. And it was so tone deaf. He couldn't even acknowledge that these people shouldn't have been paying those taxes in the first place. It was absolutely criminal. I was gobsmacked that. But that's how it is, because he gets money from the people who make the problems. These nonprofits cannot fix our problems. So thanks.
That's right. These young people are fearless. I mean, they stood toe to toe with all of the quote-unquote officials, and they got a lot done, and we appreciate them for that. Thank you all. Give them another hand. We're going to move right to the next panel, but after that, we're going to have a small break, and when we come back, before we move on, we're going to have some feedback from the audience. How's that? Okay. Thank you guys so much. Our next panel is going to be on water and environmental justice. And I'm just going to call everyone up at the same time so I don't have to come back up. I'm going to start off by calling Mama Lila Campbell. She has a resume of social justice and activism much taller than I am. But currently, she is one of the founding members of the People's Water Board and president administers over Rosa Parks Institute. Right. Mama Lila Campbell. George Vita. George is the quiet, silent type. But if you watch George works. He gets the work done without being asked. And he's an amazing worker, and he's also an artist, and he does a lot of work. So George doesn't say a lot, but he's definitely a worker. And we have also Nicole Hill, People's Water Board.
Just Nicole.
Okay, Nicole. And Jennifer Fassbender, Coalition to Oppose the Expansion of U.S. Ecology. Jennifer is also a wonderful worker and speak out on, make sure you guys don't have any plastic back there. Right? We can, if we don't have enough room, we could probably take a bench. Is it good? Okay. And so we're going to start off with Mama Lila. I don't know if you want to stay in or use that. I would prefer to sit you on the line. No.
Yeah, you could sit.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'll start by giving thanks.
You need to pull the microphone a little closer, Lila.
Okay, I can do it. Yeah. I don't want to tear it up.
Oh, here you go. Here you go.
Oh, that's good. Okay, we can do that. Okay. Yeah, I'm praising God for me being in this space. I want to say I really appreciated what Pastor Denise said when she said
how we should view this space, and a space for freedom, a space for justice. It's a beautiful space, and it's wonderful to have that space because, as you heard in Bill's report and Jonathan's report, how much our space has been taken away from us.
Yes.
We do not have public space anymore. And Eastern Market used to be a public space.
Space.
It's no longer a public space.
Space.
So it suppresses our communication with one another. We used to be able to pass out flyers at the transit center.
Yes.
They've taken that away from us. So there's a lot of breaches of democracy.
Yes.
But I thank God for this space. And also I want to acknowledge Pastor Bill held a ceremony, well no, it was a lunch, and it was a time when Charity Hicks was communicating with us. This is prior to her death. And in her communication, she talked about how we needed to respond to what was going on around us. And her words were wage love. And that's something that we really have to press ourselves for in this time,
Yes.
is that with so much hate being spewed from 45,
Yes.
it's created actually an atmosphere of hate.
Yes.
And it's stemming violence.
Yes.
And we're losing people, innocent people,
Yes.
to
Young and old.
violence because of hate.
Young and old.
So as we present this water panel, I want you to really hold on to Charity's Hicks spirit. And it certainly is in this place.
Yes.
Because she left here and lost her life, but she was a person who was for the people. She would do anything for the people. She ended up being arrested. And Pastor Bill is one of the king of action. He loves to do action. And he makes that sacrifice because he loves people. And that's a special place to be. But I want to segue into water from housing, because there's a relation. Water is related to everything.
Yes.
So as you listen to this panel, you need to know that need to be water warriors, because us are the water. We're looking at, in 5 years, it was predicted that by Michigan State study that 35% of the country would not be able to afford water. That number has ticked up to, in 3 years, that's going to happen. But when water, if it is privatized and not maintained as a human right, only 1% will be able to afford water. And we just had another study that was done by Food and Water Watch.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That the shutoffs are going on across the country.
Yes.
And at a rate where Detroit is 10th.
Right.
And you know how many shutoffs we have here? And we're 10th. And the other areas where the shutoffs are really intense are in the South.
Right.
Detroit is the most northern state that is in line in terms of shutoffs.
15 million in 2016.
15 million. And how many of you all knew that shutoffs was going on intensely somewhere else besides Detroit?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really important. Information is power,
Yes.
and we need to use it. So with housing, end up, if you have a water bill, a delinquent water bill, that is rolled onto your taxes.
Yes.
So you lose your children, if you have children,
Right.
because your house is not considered sanitary. And so the protective services come and take your children. And if you don't pay it, you lose your home. So you have homelessness added to being without water. And just think what the impact is of being without water. It has health impacts, and I'll let Nicole tell you about all of that. But right now, when we look at the water situation, it is so telling about where it's going. Not only do we have the protective services, now in Brightmoor community, and this is just breaks my heart to tell you this, but they are now sending with the Hamrick truck, they're sending the protective services to take the children away immediately, accompanied by the Dan Gilbert Private Police. Is that not egregious? And so we're going to be connected with Moratorium Now. The People's Water Board Coalition has several organizations that we can coalesce with and collaborate with.
Can you just repeat that statement about who goes to turn off the water?
They are turning off the water, shutting off the water. And let me say this. When we talk about austerity, we have Nestle's Corporation taking water out of the Great Lakes for $200 a year. And they sell it, and their profit is 2,000 times what the cost is. Now, that's again robbing the community at the expense of $150 delinquency gets your water shut off. And water is life.
Yes.
So you have, and we have total resistance to adopting an affordability plan.
Who comes to shut it off?
Hamrick. Hamrick comes to shut off the water by order of Detroit Water and Sewage Department. And we used to have Detroit Water and Sewage saying, they don't know who's in the home. They don't know who's in there. They don't know if there's pregnant women or if there's children or if there's elderly. That's what they would tell us when we would ask for the data.
Right.
So you must know something if you're sitting in protective services with Hamrick to shut off the water, take the children, and have a police oversight so that if there anything happens, it's going down in terms of criminal behavior.
Private police?
Dan Gilbert's police force. The same one that operates in Midtown, Gilbertville, Midtown, and who has auspices over our Hart Plaza, which used to be a public space, who has, you know, surveillance in Grand Circus Park, which used to be a public space, Grand Circus Park. That's Gilbertville now. Private police can ask, we were asked to move during our water ceremony. Yes. So, yes, it's chilling. And it's kind of like you want to say, I don't believe this is happening. And so we have got to wake up. This is why this kind of teaching is so important, is to make sure we have the information so that we can look at how do we interrupt this stuff. You know, we got to be like Jonathan, revolutionary. We got to go there. That's why we need the young tenderonis to go with us. I appreciate every one of them. Everyone. Yes, give them a hand. They deserve it. Yes, so the coalition is formed. Derek back there is one of our founding members of the People's Water Board. And he was with Moratorium Now when it was called McCowan. And he served on the People's Water Board representing McCowan. And so what we would do is that we try to represent the organizations and be in solidarity with the organizations that are part of the coalition. And the thing that Moratorium Now brings is that it always brings a strong, organized way of taking action that is really intentional, and when Moratorium Now shows up, you know they've been there. The message is clearly across. And so we value that so highly. That is a special place for us in the coalition. And lately, we've been having the benefit of having Jennifer Fassbender be representing us and bringing us back information from Moratorium Now. So that is really a blessing. So the other thing that I want to share with you is the whole what's going on with the schools in terms of how, again, following the money, we have not had money accounted for in terms of the poisoning of the students, so that some of you may think that they have remedied the situation by bringing in these, what they call hydration stations, but they haven't done anything about the water in the bathrooms. So when kids go in the bathroom, they can drink the water. You know how kids play in the water and they drink the water, and it's full of lead. And they have not solved the problem of how they're going to pay for the infrastructure. And Moratorium Now, Jerry did a request of how we should be responding to the lead, because the children have already been poisoned. When they announced it on August 26th, they announced it and they did the hydration, but the kids are already poisoned. And lead stays in the body, in your blood, only for 90 days, but the damage is irreversible. So those kids have already been poisoned. Next year, they're planning on doing a testing, a third-grade testing, to test them. And it's been passed by the state that they would have this testing. Those kids will not be able to pass the test because they're brain damaged. So they're going to be held back. So how many years will they be in third grade? So that's the devastation. We have $2 billion that was raised by school bonds that has not been accounted for under emergency management. The key word, emergency management. And so we don't have money to remediate the schools, yet we have all of these entities that have taken school funds. $130 million went to build Little Caesars Arena. And so we have all of these austerity issues that are really clear, and we need to be looking at these issues through that lens. We have also, when Michigan Department of Environmental Quality starts, I want to go back to the demolition. The dislocation that Bill talked about in terms of communities being dislocated, the water shutouts was used to dislocate families.
Yes.
They looked at projects where they wanted to do development, like the riverfront, and they used water shutoffs to move them off the riverfront. We also had, with the demolition and the use of the hardest hit funds for demolition, you look across the city where the foreclosed homes are being demolished with funds that reduces our tax base, and we end up with the other Detroit not having city services, but we have the playground fully equipped with private police and everything that's needed. We have the demolitions are causing lead upticks that is very serious, and the mayor he disrespects me every time I come to the mic because I come telling truth, and he takes the mic away or turns his back on me when I ask for in public comment. And so this is something that we're going to have to escalate, because that kind of reality is that they knew that they had contaminated water because they had done the testing, and yet it was just announced. So we have Flint in Detroit, with our mayor. And so we have to step it up. My time is up, but there is a long list of what's happening with water and what's happening with the contamination of water and the affordability of water. And it's being controlled because the bottom line is they want to privatize water, make it a commodity on Wall Street. So we need to follow the money and be there to show up, and we need to be ready to chant what Jonathan said, no justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
And I say no justice, no pizza.
No pizza, right.
Because we should not be eating
That's right. No
pizza.
peace. No
Justice,
pizza.
no pizza.
No pizza.
Hello everyone, it's good to see you. My name is George Vitas and my pronouns are he and him. I work with the Moratorium Now Coalition in foreclosures, evictions, and utility shutoffs. Earlier this year, we used the Freedom of Information Act to ask the Detroit Water and Sewer Department for a list of the residences subject to water shutoff this year. On August 7th, they sent us a list of 17,530 residential water accounts. Between May 4th and July 30th, the city of Detroit shut off water to 5,054 properties. We do not know how many of these were occupied. We took a close look at 2,113 of these accounts. We chose to focus on the accounts that had not yet been reconnected at the time of the letter. By the September bill, 44 of these accounts had paid up in full, and 92 were on payment plans, leaving 1,979 properties still shut off. Again, this is only within the properties that they had shut off by July 30th. Since then, the water shutoffs have continued. We would like to knock on the doors of a few hundred affected properties to hear and document how these shutoffs impact people. We are working with a team of lawyers and doctors to conduct a survey of how water shutoffs have impacted Detroiters. We believe there is a compelling legal argument that the water shutoffs are a public health crisis, and that the director of the Detroit Health Department, Jomaine Caldoun, has the authority to declare a moratorium on water shutoffs due to the impact to public health. This canvassing effort will begin in the next few weeks. If you would like to help assess the health impacts of water shutoffs in Detroit, I have a sign-up sheet here. If your water has been shut off and you would like to speak about your experience with shutoffs, we have time today to hear from several people. Please see Yvonne. If you're not comfortable sharing on this stage, please still come and see me. I would like to talk to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicole Hill, and I am currently working as an outreach coordinator for the People's Water Board Coalition. And I'm going to speak about some of the aspects of the public health crisis that results from having your water shut off. But I also want to touch on a few of the things that Mama Lila said. One of the things I want everyone to understand is that if the schools have lead and copper in their water, so do you.
That's right.
Because every school sits right in the middle of a neighborhood.
That's right.
And the mayor cannot tell me that it's just the schools. Some of these schools are brand new buildings. Their pipes are not lead contaminated unless the water is contaminating the pipes because they're new pipes. So I just wanted people to know that because I think a lot of people kind of take the mayor's version of what he says as the gospel because he's the mayor, forgetting that he's a human being first or something, some semblance of one. And 45's best friend and cousin. I like to call them the unholy trinity, which is Snyder, Duggan, and 45. Right on! Unholy trinity. Also, I want to touch on not only that, but the fact that not only are they bringing protective services out to your house when they shut your water off, but one of the ways they are doing that, from what my understanding as it was explained to me, is that prior to that, the water department actually has Gilbert security patrolling these neighborhoods and monitoring them so they know you have children in your home and they can come out and take your children when they come to disconnect your water. Just to give you a little personal aspect on the health crisis that's going on, the results from your water being cut off, is I lived through having my water cut off. And one of my party gifts was permanent lung damage from having bacterial pneumonia. So basically, I have what is medically termed as my lungs are compromised now. So during this time of year, a lot of people may see me, I may have a cough. I don't actually have anything wrong with me. I just have fluid in my lungs. And that's what I'm gonna live with for the rest of my life. Not only that, but a lot of people don't realize that when it's a water shut off in your neighborhood, that dramatically increases your chance as well of contracting waterborne illnesses such as Legionnaires, hepatitis A, sugarlosa, Shingorella, all of those are waterborne illnesses that you can contract because of bacteria being in the water line because there's a shut off somewhere on your block. I always tell people that it affects you one of two ways. There is no escaping the effects of water shutoffs. They either affect you directly or they affect you indirectly. But one way or the other, they will affect you. You have to look at the impact of having your water shut off. If your children may play with someone's children whose water's been disconnected, that will transfer bacteria. If you are working with someone and their water is shut off, it could transfer bacteria. I'm sorry, I just seen someone that I've been looking to see for a very long time. From lack of hand washing, the hepatitis A epidemic that's been running rampant through Detroit has been because a lot of these people who could not afford to keep their water on are restaurant workers, and they work in the food service industry, they work in the child care industry, and these people can't afford to keep their water on, therefore they can't properly sanitize themselves, their clothing, and their environment, and therefore that bacteria travels with them. And one thing I just wanted to point out to everyone, which I'm pretty sure if you're here, you already know, but pass the message on to one of your suburbanite neighbors who are still walking around with their heads in the clouds, is that this is not about being lazy. This is not about being a person who, as Daryl Latimer would have said, chooses to buy brand name gym shoes and cable TV and cellular phones. This is about unaffordability. They can't afford to pay their water bills. No one would rightfully choose to live without water when our body is made up of water. That's suicide. That's right. That's exactly what it is. And since I don't believe that anybody really deliberately wants to kill themselves and would just let their water get shut off to do it, instead they decide to conduct this massive shut-off campaign and create a genocide instead. That's ultimately what our mayor and our governor has been doing to the citizens of Detroit, Highland Park, Flint, Benton Harbor, Hamtramck. If you can't displace us by foreclosure, all that you can't displace by foreclosure, you'll destroy by systematic poisoning and lack of affordable, running, clean, accessible water. And me personally, and I hope that you feel the same, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of trying to play nice with people who are having out to get me. I'm tired. I've talked and talked and talked enough, and now it's time for action. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of being angry and sick and tired all the time. And watching this systematically happen is they destroyed a city that I've always known as being for the people, because the people created it. The unionized auto workers created this city. The teachers, the students, the residents, the restaurant workers, they created this city. Because if this city would have been created by corporations, it wouldn't have been here. This is a city of the people. This is not the city of buildings. This is not the city of Quicken Loans. And Dan Gilbert, AKA enemy number 2, because number 1 has to be Duggan. It does. It's just atrocious, the things that he's doing to the city, and we still have people that stand by and say, oh, well, you know, they did a Quicken Loans video. Oh, well, I want to see what people are doing with their money. I want to know how they're budgeting their money. That's what people were saying. You're working for Quicken Loans. Maybe you should ask some of your coworkers how they're budgeting their money, because you come from the suburbs, you're getting paid a living wage, while it's other people that work at Quicken Loans that are getting paid slave wages. And it all boils down to them trying to take the city over. And I, for one, am not going to stand for them taking the city over.
Right.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Jennifer, and I can relate to Adele talking about having to go after all these natural speakers, which I am not. So bear with me, please. But I am with the coalition to oppose the expansion of U.S. ecology. And like Mama Lila was talking about with that Food and Water Watch report last week, I was horrified because I didn't know that this is not a Detroit thing, that it's happening across the country and beyond. As water is commodified and increasingly privatized, fewer and fewer people globally have access to affordable, clean water. It's clear that no species, not us or any other species, can live without water, and for those who do have access, all of this evidence is coming out that the water is contaminated. So here in Detroit, as Mama Lila mentioned, at the beginning of the school year, the kids were welcomed back for the school year with the water shut off due to the lead and copper contamination. And as Nicole says, clearly that means that all of us need to be concerned, because it's not just in the schools. But of course, contamination doesn't come from malfunctioning or corroded pipes. It also comes from industry, and Detroit has obviously a very long history of heavy industry. And U.S. Ecology is the industry that I am here to talk about today. They have 6 locations in Wayne County. One of them is on the western edge of Wayne County, and it sits on their own hazardous waste landfill. All of the U.S. Ecology locations haul all of the solid hazardous waste to this landfill. Other entities also bring in their hazardous waste for permanent disposal at this landfill. For instance, right now, about a month ago, they were approved for, the landfill was approved for a 10-fold expansion, which is just on time, because just after that approval occurred, they started getting in from an account in Lucky, Ohio, radioactive contaminated soils. So there are currently 11 semi-trucks full of radioactive soils that are coming 365 days a year for the next 10 years to go to this landfill. So that's just one example. Let's see. So within the city of Detroit, there are 2 U.S. Ecology locations. One of them, you may have seen, it's next to the incinerator. And then the other one, the north location, is just east of Hamtramck. It's off of Mount Elliott on Georgia Street. And they applied to expand by 9 times a few years ago with MDEQ. So as part of this expansion application, they also want to bring in qualitatively more hazardous substances too. So examples of that are benzene, dioxins, arsenic, and vinyl chloride. So they to make the community feel better, they said at that particular location, they won't process radioactive waste, but the one next to the incinerator does. So that was their little concession. DEQ said, though, that since this was voluntary to stop bringing in radioactive waste to that particular location, that at any time, if they want to start bringing radioactive waste to that Georgia Street location, they're welcome to do that. So after processing what isn't solidified and sent to the hazardous waste landfill, that multiple states use. People, Canada, other states, they all bring it here to Michigan for permanent disposal in our peninsula states surrounded by fresh water. But whatever isn't processed and solidified and brought to the landfill is dumped into Detroit's public sewers. And they have an agreement with DWSD to flush 300,000 gallons a day of treated wastewater into our sewers. They have had hundreds of air and water quality violations over the past few years. And just one example, Keith Matheny from the Detroit Free Press cited that he found an example of 350 times the legal amount of mercury going into the sewers that go basically turn into our drinking water supply. Yet somehow they're supposed to do right by the neighborhood and expand by 9 times and have more hazardous substances being processed there. Ironically, I still can't wrap my head around this. They also have been approved to be exempted for groundwater and soil testing of any sort. They do not have to do any testing whatsoever. When we pushed on this, the coalition, MDEQ, not US Ecology, but MDEQ said, you know what, it's pure clay. It's 80 feet of clay beneath that facility. There's no way anything could migrate down. They said it must migrate horizontally, so horizontally into the neighborhood, right? So, but that's perfectly justified as far as they're concerned. But interestingly, this year, after years of DEQ saying that it's just pure clay, so there's no way that it could migrate down, DEQ said, quote, these conditions were no longer being met, as if the soil composition beneath the facility changed. So now the US Ecology, they reapplied with a status of not in an aquifer. So there's groundwater there, but there just isn't a freshwater aquifer that these contaminations could leach into. So they were approved. So I don't know how a hazardous waste processing facility can avoid having regular tests. What's the problem? Why not test? The previous owners had to test. They had an annual test, and so did our coalition. We tested. We went to just the perimeter of the facility and just on the outside, some soil samples. And among other things, we found 10 times the acceptable limits of arsenic and 80 times higher amount of copper than in the average Michigan soils. When we gave this information to NDEQ, we were completely ignored. And another thing to mention too, if you go onto Google Maps, you can see that half of the grounds of their entire facility is gravel. It's not even cemented over, so how could that not penetrate through those soils? Anyway, so a few years ago when this permit was initially applied for, they had 2 public hearings. And DEQ sent out 4,000 notification postcards to the immediate neighborhood. There are more than 10,000 people that live within 1 mile of the facility, so most people did not hear about it. They did not offer translation services. The postcards were only in English. And this is right next to Hamtramck, where a lot of people don't speak English as their primary language. Richard Conforti of NDEQ, when I asked him about this, he said that no one asked for translation services. So that was really disturbing. So we've been working for a while to get another public hearing to allow more community members to express their disdain and their disapproval of this expansion. Nick Leonard of the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center proposed to DEQ in a letter reminding them that EPA has laws against discrimination, and this whole process has left out that entire community that doesn't speak English as a primary language. So DEQ has very recently, they have agreed to a public meeting, although no DEQ member has had the same story about what the difference between a meeting and a hearing is, other than the public comment period time where in a hearing they have to respond to all of the written and oral comments, whereas in a meeting they don't, and they can't approve this expansion the very next day after a meeting. But we are still going to have a meeting, and I do have a sign-up sheet here if anybody is interested in knowing when that date is set. They're thinking that it's going to be in December, but DEQ is really scrambling to try and figure out how to translate, how to offer translation services. We've given them many options, many different ways that they could effectively offer translation services, but they're still scratching their head. They're thinking, though, it is going to be in December. So if all y'all could come to that public meeting, that would be very helpful to have as many people there as possible. Now, as long as we're manufacturing with that whole toxics in, toxics out mentality, we're going to need places like US Ecology, but we don't need to be importing other people's hazardous waste from other states, from Canada, another country, to the Great Lakes state. We don't need to be taking in other people's waste. We need to be doing whatever we can to protect our waters, and we as Detroiters, we need to do whatever we can to help to. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Why don't everybody just breathe, because that's a lot, right? Just breathe, just breathe. Okay, one important thing.
You know, Jennifer was talking about the lead and copper rule. So Duggan is on the list of people who are going to Lansing to oppose the rule because the feeling that it's too stringent. So here we have lead and copper contamination in the schools based on the lead levels now, and we're trying to make it more stringent, and he's opposed. So how can you contaminate and poison children and then go against the legislation? So it points to how we need to take these criminals down, because that's criminal. That's criminal behavior on the part of our leadership. And so we need to vote and watch who's being put on the Charter Commission, because he has 4 candidates, and you need to know who they are and be sure you use your vote, your power of the vote.
We're going to get into all of that, but we're going to just breathe right now, take it down a notch. This is a lot. But before we go on to our comment section, we have some what ifs, because we don't want to just keep inundating you with the problems. So we have some what ifs that we're going to bring in intermittently throughout the evening. These are what if solutions. We're going to start, they're going to just read them to you.
Okay, so These are some demands that, we have, that would be solutions that these people who have been asking us, what should we do about it, making decisions on their own at City Lab. So we say housing and water are fundamental human rights. We demand a moratorium on all bank and tax foreclosures and evictions, set all rents on the basis of affordability, no more than 25% of income, including utilities or including utility payments. Use hardest hit homeowners funds to keep people in their homes rather than demolishing the houses.
Yes.
End gentrification and the subsidizing of dislocation of the poor. Access to clean, affordable water is a right. No water shutoffs. Restore water to those cut off. Water rates based on affordability index of no more than 2.5% of income.
Hello everybody, I'm talking about utilities and energy, and our solution to these and their massive overpricing are the people's takeover of all utilities and energy producers. Water, electricity, natural gas, oil, solar manufacturers, etc. The people have a right to utilities that are affordable and produced in a safe and green manner. Rebuild and extend mass transit to make all jobs available, or make jobs more available to all. Full accessibility for persons with disabilities at all levels. Cancel the massive debt preventing decent mass transit in the richest country in the world.
Yes.
That's right.
Environmental justice implemented immediately. All steps necessary to stop global warming and protect the environment.
Yes. Yes. Power to the people. All power to all. Power to the people.
That's what we do. We don't get it. We don't get it.
Shut it down.
We don't get it.
Shut it down.
As we're gonna move right into some comments, and then we'll have our little break. We have two people that I'm gonna call up to start it. We're gonna keep the comments short because we have a lot to go. I'm calling Brother Cameron. Is he around? And Shy Simpkins. Sirius Simpkins. Each Sirius Simpkins. He's going to talk to you about transit. And Brother Cameron, and then just after that, if you want to make a comment, just line up to my left.
Brief comment, right?
Yeah, they're going to be brief.
Yeah.
We're going to do that for a few minutes, and then we're going to have a short break, and then we'll get to the second section. Here comes Brother Cameron. He'll tell you a little bit about what he's advocating for.
Hey, how everybody doing? Good. I'm gonna start with a movement called Coalition for Civil Rights in Michigan. And I had an event Thursday, thanks to Mark Twain now, as well as Reverend Al Sharpton's group and the church donated it all to me. I received 13 cases of water for the DPS schools. And we will take them tomorrow down to 2 schools and 1 going to the superintendent, because his children also went to DPS schools. Well, 3 weeks ago, Fuqua Bay and his group of Moore Science Temple took cases of water to 5 different DPS schools. And each school they went to, they asked the principal, where's the supply of water at? And he said, we don't have a supply of water for the children. And he said, what? So that's what got me kick-started my movement right there. He had to tell me twice. And if I could come from Inkster, from the west, to save the east, y'all can come from the east to the west to save us, because the water is family all through Wayne County.
Yeah.
Because the source of the water comes from Lake Erie to Detroit, then it comes straight to Inkster to the substation to be distributed right back to Wayne County. And living out there with the hazardous waste trucks, I see Jerry and Mike, pictures of the hazardous waste team, man, there's about 10 trucks a day out there for the past 4 weeks. And they said, I asked one of the guys I used to work with Wayne County Road Commission with, that works for the company out of Livonia. I said, what's wrong? He said, the water's low. I said, imagine that, right underneath my nose. And so we got to all help each other, as well as the water here in Wayne County. Glenn, which is my brother, and his sister Bishop Jefferson is working on, as well as Jackson Prison. It's contaminated DDT Agent Orange. You have to take a cup and put a napkin over some toilet paper, and just to get good water, but it's still toxic in all the prison system in Jackson. Changed the wells, didn't change the pipes though. And so it's our only prison. You can put a cup of water this high in a cup, and when you wake up in the morning, it turns into dust. And so this is with the prison. So now I called Jerry after they left my event Thursday. I called him about half an hour later, because I knew y'all was here yesterday to Ben Harbor. I said, Jerry, I just got a call from Ben Harbor from my son's mom. He said, about what? I said, they said the water had lead in it up in Ben Harbor. Imagine that. So everybody's affected with this contamination of water. Well, I talked to me and Fuqua Bay. They didn't know Fuqua Bay was on the phone. They had no conference phone. I was talking to Chuck Gager with Channel 4 and Kevin Beats. And I asked them about the contamination of Belleville water. I told everybody to boil their water. I said, well, we used to boil our water. What contamination would they take out? He said, take them all out. Right? So hold on. I said, okay, so that means if I boil, that means the contamination will be at the top, not the middle, and at the bottom. But that means everything in the middle will be triple effect. It comes down again. You like a boil. I said, do they sell boiled water in the store? He said, no. I said, what is the source of contamination in the water in Belleville? That's Wayne County. That's us, y'all. Right? He said, I don't know. I said, was it hepatitis A, hepatitis B, HIV, AIDS, is due or P? He said, I don't know. I said, but you want me to boil the water? You don't even know. He said, hold on, I got to get you somebody else. Because he couldn't answer the question. But he's telling everybody on his news station, telling, boil your water in Belleville. So he wants to boil water here in Detroit. He wants to boil water here and abroad. It's terrible. You know, they trying to genocide us. Watch 3 the Hard Way back in the 70s with Jim Brown, where they tried to genocide the black communities by killing them with the water. And then there's another organization or another company that does that too. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I just want to thank y'all, and I'm fighting. I'm headed to next. I'm going to Flint to get some water to Flint. I'm asking to drive a month and a half in advance, as well as that. And then we're gonna go to Jackson, give every inmate a bottle of water. Then we're gonna go to Allen River, give every inmate a bottle of water. And then we're headed to Mid Harbor. Then we're coming back to Detroit. Thank you very much, God bless.
God bless you, brother.
Good afternoon. I'm Siri Simpson, and I have worked with a number of advocacy groups on transit, and particularly public transit in Detroit. And I'm hearing us lately represented by people that don't ride the bus, or that don't have to ride the bus, people that have cars and ride the bus by choice. These are the people that they built the queue line for. It sounds like a nice idea on paper, but $22 million that were given to the city of Detroit for public transit to enhance job accessibility went into building the queue line. It was built to the needs of developers who gave us the idea that they financed it. The majority of the financing came from public funds with small donations or contributions from them. Now, they now run public transit. Detroit lost part of its history when the Q line was built. Woodward Avenue is our history. Dr. King marched down Woodward Avenue. We've had Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, and every other Labor Day parades down Woodward. Since I was a child, we no longer have access to Woodward Avenue. I'm understanding if you want to have a march or demonstration on Woodward, you have to pay the Q line. Wow. But none of us know who gave Woodward Avenue to the Q line. It was not Detroiters. We were never asked to vote on whether we wanted the Q line or not. And since we were told and I went to many meetings between 2012 and the inception of construction, that it was going to follow Michigan's Complete Streets Guidelines, which insists that seniors, the disabled, cyclists, and pedestrians all be considered in any construction on Michigan roads. If you think that the Q line considers anyone but bicyclists and people that don't have anywhere in particular to be, you're mistaken. The Q line was built and it followed ADA compliance to the extent that it did allow for handicap seating. There's 8 seats in each car, but those seats are where bicycles are stored to ride. Well, they got to be a little much, so they took out half of the seats from each of the cars. So now there's lots of room for bicycles, and handicapped people in wheelchairs and walkers are standing in the aisles on the Q line. Meanwhile, bus service was rerouted. We were told that it would be restored when the Q line was completed. So the Q line was supposed to be constructed in 2 stages, starting down around Larned and working up to, getting old, up to Adams. Okay, so for 3 years, the Woodward bus and every other bus that used to come down Woodward through that area was rerouted. People trying to get to the church of the Woodward and Adams, where the Michigan Human Rights Council and other social organizations serve the needs of the underserved. They lost access. The Woodward bus dropped them off 4 blocks away. So the People's Platform, which I'm working with now, went in and we asked DDOT, now that the Q line was completed, could they please put the Woodward bus back on Woodward? I believe that citizens that ask the city to do something for the money that we pay for are being punished. Instead of rerouting the Woodward bus on the path it took before, they rerouted it somewhere where none of the buses even connect. They have like these 10 major lines that you can't even transfer from the Woodward to the Grand River bus. Come on. These are major bus lines. So what I'm saying is we have groups coming into our city claiming to represent the interests of people of Detroit who are really just collaborating with the people that are robbing us. We were definitely robbed on transit. If I could answer anybody's question about this, I'd be happy to.
Thank you so much. Yeah. We have a lot to do and we have a lot to cover, but right now we're going to take a short break, 10 minutes, no more, and then we will continue. So don't leave, get some refreshments, do whatever you need to do, and we're going to come back. Thank you all.
I don't know.
guys will both be in the next panel. It's the education panel. No, just send it and Mike.
Hi.
Mashar up to the front here. Elena Harada will speak first. She's a local community activist, former DPS, this says some former DPS board member, still in exile, and a founding member of Centro Obrero de Detroit.
Thank you. I designed it myself and Kimmy C printed it. So I'm not going to take very long because for real, I'm going to tell you almost everything that happened in Detroit Public School was woven through the presentations all day today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the water because that water business is fraudulent in Detroit Public Schools, or at least it's not good. They're presenting it as a problem that the water is contaminated, but it's a ruse to hand off the buildings. And it's a way of saying your children are not safe to go to these schools. And there are a number of things, when we talk about curriculum, education, classroom size, certification of teachers, she's going to do that. I'm going to talk about governance for a minute. You know, I'm going to stand up because it feels like. Okay. Can you hear me? Thank you. On issues of governance, just for a bit of background, I was a member of the Detroit Public School Board from 2010 till 2016. The entire time we were under emergency management. And make no mistake, Detroit is still under emergency management. The only difference is there's a quote-unquote superintendent, and the board is a board in captivity, where we were a board in exile. So there's an alleged elected board, but they were actually hand-chosen by the powers that be. And if we're not careful, we're going to see the same thing happen with this charter commission.
Yeah.
So the charter commission is about to be on the ballot, even though it shouldn't be. And that's, Dan Gilbert has selected a group, and there's two major PACs behind them. It's all connected to the schools. Dan Gilbert actually came out before the superintendent was selected and said that he wanted for Alicia Merriweather to be the superintendent. So rather than make her the superintendent, they chose Viti, but they still put Alicia on payroll, along with Tanya Allen, along with all of the people from Skillman. Some of them who even said that teachers should be put in jail. Detroit teachers should be put in jail because they were really pushing that failure narrative and that they were destroying our children's lives and that the teachers deserved to go to jail. Those very people are now on the payroll working with Viti, in case you have any questions about Viti. I'm going to only touch on this, and a lot of people don't think this is important, but I think it's very important that a city that is 85 to 90% black has a white mayor and a white school superintendent. It's an extremely powerful message that is sent. And for anybody who doesn't think it's important, you're probably white. You can't imagine that happening in a white district. You can't imagine a white district saying we don't need certified teachers and you can put all these kids in this one school and let's give this building to Life Remodeled for $1 and then they can rent it back to us for $15 a foot. Or let's take Marygrove and turn it into a Latin and Greek boarding school. That's it. Who needs African-centered curriculum when we can do Latin and Greek? And you keep on going backwards and we're going to find ourselves in some pretty scary territory. So I really want for people here to think about what it means to have a public school district. Public school districts, let's say Bloomfield Hills, none of them are perfect, but they get to govern. They get to decide what buildings are going to open and close. They fight. They actually have disagreements among themselves. You never see Detroit School Board have disagreements. They can only go like this. They don't have a big vocabulary. They have no questions, and never has a FOIA come out of them. When we were on the school board, the 7 of us in exile on the school board, we had to file FOIAs to get our meeting minutes. Our own meeting minutes we couldn't get without filing a Freedom of Information. It was our meeting. Now I could do Facebook Live, but I wasn't doing it then, so I would have them, and I could send them back to them. But it's just incredible that the level of governance of the city of Detroit, the Detroit School Board, which is completely, utterly irrelevant. Utterly irrelevant. I don't know why they have elections. They have, and the unions, I just want to give a shout out to Michigan Federation of Teachers, who are complete lackeys for the corporate agenda, because they did everything that they could to defeat us while we were in exile and fighting for teachers and fighting for students. So the Michigan Federation of Teachers has a special place in hell. Right next to the building trades that built Little Caesars Arena with our school money. Labor is not what labor says it is. For those of you who are in Detroit, there's a big division between what the labor movement is to white people and what it is to Detroit taxpayers. There's a huge difference. I come from the House of Labor, by the way. I was trained by Cesar Chavez. I've organized with the United Farm Workers. I've organized with FLOC. I've been the union president of Local 1064. I am not new here. I have a little bit of basis to talk about what the labor movement is and what it has become versus what it has been and what it should be. It can be. One of the last things I'm going to say, parting, and I'm sorry if I have offended any of the dues-paying members, if there's any of them left. But what I do want to say is that in this moment of right to work, of labor being dismantled, who here comes from United Auto Workers background? Who here is father, grandfather?
Yes.
Okay, so remember us? Remember walking the picket lines? Right. Remember shutdown? Yes. Remember all the things that the plants brought to us?
Yes.
So if there is right to work, and there is no absolute requirement for members to be dues-paying members, there's also this. And my grandmother always said it's an ill wind that blows no good. If there is no labor movement, there's no contract, there's also the right to a wildcat strike. Okay, they can't stop you. There's no binding arbitration. There's nothing that hamstrings workers like the collective bargaining agreements that have come to pass. The ones that have, there is absolutely no legal requirement that you have to not honor somebody's picket line. You can honor everybody's picket line now. You don't have to cross a picket line. I want to give a big shout out to United here for actually having a strike. Remember strikes? When was the last time there was a strike? Anywhere in Detroit. So I want to say this. If you have children in Detroit Public Schools, raise your hand, please. Damn. I am not preaching to the choir here. Okay, there's nobody here. Our kids are grown. Our kids are grown, and our kids were actually there when there was governance. Yeah, when we had a tax base. We have, and my grandchildren I have one grandchild in Detroit Public Schools, but I have 2 daughters that graduated from Detroit Public Schools during the second reign of terror of the takeovers. If we do not defend public education in Detroit, we're going to have a very segregated life here on the trajectory that we're on. So if we talked about, and I kept saying this, and I was writing about it, and I was waiting for somebody to answer me, and you know, when I write on my Facebook and I talk on the radio, I end up answering my own questions half of the time. But why is it that all the new Detroiters are coming here and building these fabulous places? I live right down the street in Corktown. I don't even know where to begin to tell you about Corktown. It is so utterly gentrified. And people have children. Where are all these little white kids going to go to school? Where are they going? They are not going to Detroit Public Schools, and that's why they don't give a shit about what happens to Detroit Public Schools. That's why they're not worried about 50 kids in a classroom. Their kids aren't going there. I'll make this quick. I know that Dan Gilbert has plans, I read it in Cranes. Cranes will tell you what's going on. I read in Cranes that Dan Gilbert is negotiating for a Cranbrook campus to come downtown in that, who talked about the city within the city? That's where they're going. I guess they're gonna have their own water system too. But stay tuned, the fight's not over. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, as always. Next up, we have Jasenia Venegas, who is a public school teacher and a great organizer with the Poor People's Campaign.
Can everybody hear? No. Can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, it's better. I feel a little under the weather, so I'm going to kind of sit, and I wrote most things that I'm going to say down, but I'm probably not going to get to them all. So my name is Jasenia Venegas. I'm a cultural worker, I'm a political organizer with the Poor People's Campaign. I'm an educator, I'm an artist, I work for Detroit Public Schools. And I've been going into my third year now. And working in Detroit Public Schools, just teaching in Detroit, period, has been frustrating, it's been anxious-filled, it's been fear-inducing, and it's been very, very challenging. And it's not the students, it's the whole system around it. So instead of telling you statistics and numbers, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories that I think illustrate what educators and kids face in the classroom every day. So my first really jarring experience was when I was placed by my teacher training program, which was really terrible, and that's a whole other topic we should talk about, who's teaching in Detroit schools, but they placed me in the summer school program in a high school out on the west side of Detroit, far, far west, and I was teaching English 10th grade. The kids were 16 to 18-year-olds, some were repeating the class, some were taking it for the first time, some needed it to graduate, this and that and the other. And the first assignment I gave was this paragraph on a short story that we had read in class, your opinion, what they thought about it. And as I was reviewing the papers, every single one, I was in shock because the level of writing was elementary school at best. It was like 3rd grade. And I began to cry because not out of pity, but out of anger. I couldn't understand who the F let these kids go on and on and on through the system, thinking that they were okay, you know? How am I gonna tell these kids that you might not be able to go to college like you planned? You might not be able to answer those little paragraph questions they ask you on job applications or college applications. How do you tell a kid that? And then on top of that, if they do make it through that process, that all of their college years are going to be spent struggling because they're not going to be at the level they need to be to read the materials, to write the papers they have to write. And then the pressure came in, I'm like, wait. Am I supposed to teach them 6 years of knowledge in 2 months? 1 hour a day, every day? Obviously that's impossible, even for the most seasoned teacher. And I was a brand new teacher on top of that. So that was my first taste of like, okay, you read about things, you hear about things, but experiencing it and living it and seeing it are very, very different. So you fast forward to my first year teaching, and I get 10 marble notebooks, I get 2 glue sticks, I get a big thing of chart paper, a stack of construction papers, 1 big set of crayons, 1 big set of markers, and 30 5-year-olds in a classroom on Gratiot on 7 Mile, in one of the poorest zip codes in Detroit. And I remember coming home every day crying because I didn't know what to do. I know how to teach, but what they're asking me to do is not just teach. Because these kids are not just there to learn, they're there for comfort, they're there for food, they're there for a warm space, they're there for clean water. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself into? And it wasn't the kids as much as everything around it. It was the fact that for our school of 800 students, we had 2 social workers. What are they going to really do? We had 1 psychologist that came to the school, was spread out. And this was actually an EAA school. It was a DPS school that was turned to EAA. And then, yeah, Brenda Scott Academy. And so that's when I began seeing that it was almost impossible to teach the students when all the other needs that allow a person to be in the right mindset to learn were not there. So I learned a lot that year. I cried a lot that year. I almost quit that year, but I was like, someone's got to do this. It's fine. I ended up moving to another school. Now I'm in Southwest. Now I'm in my third year teaching. And I have, it's the first time that I kind of know what I'm doing, in the sense of like I've been teaching for a few years. I kind of know what to expect. I know that I'm going to have an overcrowded classroom. I know that I might have to make sure I save supplies from the year before to make sure I have more, all these things. I already know these things. And one of the conclusions that I've come to through my observations is that when you're teaching, the system produces these particular conditions that causes me and teachers to default to oppressive tactics for keeping order in the classroom. So it doesn't matter that I'm this radical and like, I want to do all these things, because when I have 28 students in the classroom, in a small classroom, and they're all 5-year-olds, I see myself reverting back to those mean, very oppressive, like, just sit here, don't move, because I'm just trying to manage and don't have to stop myself, be like, okay, wait. Whatever, we just won't get through this lesson today, so I'm not going to worry about getting through this, because I need to focus on not producing the same oppressive conditions, the same oppressive reactions when my classroom is becoming quote-unquote chaotic. So, even the curriculum that we adapted this year, it's great, I really like it, but there's a lot of outdated teaching styles in Detroit public schools. A lot of teachers are older, they're fed up, they're tired, they don't want to learn anything new. They know what they know and they just want to, it's a paycheck now, they just want to keep it moving. And two, you can have great curriculum, but if you don't have conditions in the classroom to have that curriculum work, it's just not going to work. An example is I have 30 students, and even simple things like I have 30 students and I have these desks, and I've had to fit 8 students at each desk. And they're 5, so they're learning motor skills. So for them to write, they need about a lot of elbow room. So right now they're kind of crowded in little desks. And people will come in and just give you solutions. Well, just have some of them sit on the floor and some of them sit over here, and then you'll solve. It's like, okay, but that's gonna take like a week of training and like an hour of my day, and then you tell me I have to teach from bell to bell. I have no time to stop. And so it's very contradicting. On top of that, you have me working an 8-hour day, but give me 45 minutes to plan an 8-hour day. That just doesn't make sense. And I'm teaching 4 different subjects. And the kids only get 15 minutes of playtime a day. They're 5. And they get gym every other day, but sometimes because they're so understaffed, the gym teacher gets pulled to cover other classes. So it's like, it's not the teachers per se, or the administrators per se, or the district per se. It's like the entire system is messed up. The structure doesn't work. The structure doesn't work. And so these are my observations. The last thing I would say is that schools, because I'm getting angry. I am angry a lot. But schools need to be centers, community centers. They need to have a clinic. They need to have, a food pantry. They need to have accessibility to clothing and services and all these things, enough to support the community. That's what they should be. A little example, when I was on the east side, they had a bed bug problem. Why did they have a bed bug problem? Because we all live in the same neighborhood, we're all going to the same school, and it's so freaking expensive to get a bed bug treatment. I know because I've had bed bugs like 3 times when I was teaching in New York and when I was teaching here. Like, it's expensive. So someone who doesn't have the money, they're not going to pay for a bed bug treatment. The school should be paying for that. Schools should be able to say, okay, in our budget, we're going to have this money allocated to help families, because then guess what? We won't get bed bugs in school. Like, doesn't that make sense? That just makes sense to me. Why can't that be the kind of services, the kind of, systems that schools can provide for the community?
I just want to intervene here. I have a friend who I'm going to visit in prison, who was the principal of Bennett Elementary, and she spent a lot of money from gift cards from Norman Shai, and a big chunk of that money went to washers and dryers and bed bug treatments, as well as a roof for the top of the building. She spent $65,000. $45,000 of it was gift cards, and $20,000 was her own money, but she wasn't allowed to show those receipts because the judge in federal court was the partner of Judge Rhodes. So I just want to shout out to the Detroit principals.
Thank you for that. Okay, perfect. The last thing I'm going to say about the water, I went to do the 2 different meetings. I went to a DWSD meeting where I didn't know, but Mayor Duggan was going to speak, and ended up I saw some folks there. And basically what Mayor Duggan was saying was like, oh, the school water thing, no, that's the superintendent's jurisdiction. That's their jurisdiction. And whatever, people started getting quote unquote rallying to shut down the meeting, whatever. So I was like, okay, let me go to this other meeting for water from the superintendent. So I go to Mayor's meeting and his whatever people, and they're saying that, oh, no, see, like, that water thing, that's the city's jurisdiction. And then one of the women that's next to Viti says, she's like, well, you know, either way, what happens at home is not connected to the school thing. Those are 2 separate things. And so I had to go up real quick and be like, hold up. First of all, whatever happens in school definitely comes into the classroom. And it doesn't affect just the teachers, but it affects every student around them, especially when you're shutting off water. So if you think that there's a divide between school and home, then you clearly have no idea how schools work. And I just want to make sure that that is what the superintendent and the city government is saying. It's their fault.
It's their fault. Thank you so much, Jasenia. Next, we're going to have Mikhail Mashawar speak. They are a student organizer at U of M Dearborn, and they were involved with the recent strike at U of M to get better working conditions for lecturers, and they can speak more about that.
Hi, you guys. Like Adele said, my name is Mikhail Mashawar. I'm an Arab student at the University of Michigan Dearborn, at the Dearborn campus. And so one thing that I was asked to speak about here today was what has been happening in regards to this anti-Zionist, or this Zionist repression kind of faculty members. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of. It's made major headlines for the past month or so around the country. And basically what's been happening, and just really briefly, well, somewhat semi-briefly, is that there was a professor, a tenure track professor, about a month ago, refused to write a letter of recommendation for a student that was applying to a university in Israel, right? And so answering the call to BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, called for by Palestinians, he did his part, and he refused to write this letter of recommendation for the student to study in an apartheid state in Israel that is every day oppressing Palestinians, murdering Palestinians, committing this genocide against the Palestinian people. And I mean, we can see this right now. The past year or so, there have been the right of return marches that have been happening. And he's doing his part as a faculty member and as a concerned global citizen to do his part against Zionism, right? And so another instructor, this time was a graduate student instructor at GSI at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor. She refused to write a letter of recommendation for a student based on the calls for BDS, the calls for boycotting Israel. And so the university immediately responded to this within a few days. They claimed that they would punish the professors that refused to endorse this Zionism. And within like a week, the professor, his name is John Cheney Lippold. He's a professor at the College of Literature, Science, and Arts. The administration decided to deny him sabbatical for 2 years, and they also took away his annual merit-based salary increase for the year. They said if it happened one more time, that if he did this one more time or something very similar, they would fire him. And this is a faculty member that has, I don't know if he's actually achieved tenure, but he's tenure track and he's approaching tenure. And
for some instances such as this, as that go against like academic freedom and integrity, to just so blatantly attack them and persecute them is just absolutely, it's not okay. It's unacceptable. And so some of the things that have been happening around this, students and faculty members have immediately been organizing around this. And this is interesting because the University of Michigan Ann Arbor, although it has been like a hotbed of Zionism, has also been a hotbed of anti-Zionism and resistance against these measures. Last year, the U of M student government at Ann Arbor passed a resolution for divestment and investigating divestment from Israel. And 2 years ago, the U of M Dearborn campus also passed a resolution in favor of divestment from Israel. So the students have been supportive of anti-Zionist actions for the past several years. For over a decade, Dearborn had been trying to pass resolutions in favor of divesting from Israel. So what's been happening around this issue is there have been petitions that have been created by Jewish Voices for Peace and graduate students, which they recently walked up to the to U of M and submitted the petition with over 8,000 signatures against the consequences that have been incurred for John Cheney Lippold. And there was a rally last week as well around what was happening. Another response was the Senate, the faculty senate at U of M. They said the executive arm of the central faculty governance system believes that faculty members have a right to reject writing letters of recommendation that go against their personal backgrounds or beliefs, and the decision to write letters must remain in the hands of faculty members. So these are a few of the things. These are a few of the things that have been happening around this. You can contact me if you want to get involved in what's been going on at U of M, but we need to resist the Zionism. We need to resist like these repressive actions that have been taken against anti-Zionist people. So I think this is really important, so thank you, everyone.
Free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
All right, thanks to everyone on the education panel for speaking. We are going to do a couple of announcements before the labor panel. So Sharon is going to come up and make an announcement about donations.
Yes. You know, it's so great that all of you came today, and it just makes it great, and it's so wonderful to be together and hear these issues. And Moratorium Now would really appreciate your support and help financially to cover the costs for this event, and do what you can, and we would really appreciate it. And these orange buckets are coming around now, so thank you very much.
Don't feel pressured because this
All right,
is
so
the
while the donation bucket is going around, we're going to have Josh and Jack read some more demands submitted by people who are attending. These are the what-ifs that Yvonne referred to. So these are, again, more demands again on our system that would actually help people instead of serving the rich.
All right, so some more demands. The other ones were good too, so here's some additional ones. Dismantle the Pentagon war budget.
Yeah! That's good! That's number one!
take the $1 trillion a year spent for imperialist war and use those funds to ensure that the human needs of every person are guaranteed and met.
I like that one.
Immediately fund all social programs for the poor. Heating assistance, food stamps, child health, Medicaid, etc. Use the funds to rebuild the country's infrastructure under public control.
I like that one.
Next one. A job at a living wage is a right. $15 in a union now, with wage hikes tied to inflation. No sub-minimum wage for restaurant workers, farm workers, youth, persons with disabilities, etc. End two-tier wages. Fight for an international minimum wage to build worker solidarity against the multinational corporations that oppress us. End union busting. Eliminate all labor laws that stand in the way of union organization, including right to work. A national jobs program to end all unemployment and underemployment. Free public education through college and university level. Cancel all student debt. Open admission at all levels with affirmative action to remediate the years of unequal education in city schools. Rebuild city schools so they are community centers for our youth. Stop funding charters and other private institutions. Support for all teachers and public school workers and defense of their right to strike.
I'm going to start out with immigration. We want full legal rights for all immigrants, whether undocumented dreamers or anyone else. There are no borders and worker struggles, no border wall. Then we have healthcare. Free and universal healthcare is a basic right. Full nationalization and takeover of the entire healthcare system at all levels, including pharmaceutical manufacturers. If Cuba can do it, why can't we? Equal pay, rights for women. Full reproductive choice, the right to work and living in an environment free of harassment and degradation. Full maternity or paternity leave and child care for parents. Full rights and protections to LGBTQ people, extend civil rights protections and equal rights protections to all queer people, and the discrimination against people with disabilities. Next up, banks. Cancel the debt to the banks, municipal debt, Puerto Rican debt, debt to all oppressed nations, student debt, mortgage debt, auto debt, etc. The banks owe reparations in the form of $1 trillion to the oppressed for the robbery from slavery, stealing native land, and colonialism. To the massive destruction of Latinx wealth from the foreclosure epidemic. Nationalize the bank under worker and community control. Finally, police. Disarm the police. And mass incarceration. And mass incarceration and prison slave labor. Full rights to the unionization for prisoners. Empty the jails immediately of all those incarcerated for nonviolent crimes and retrain all prisoners at marketable job schools as they move to be released. And all remnants of white supremacy, whether taught in the education curriculum, statues honoring racist colonialists and culture, and the way history is taught and portrayed. All power to all the people. All power to all the people. All power to all the people. I can't hear you. All power to all the people. All power to all the people.
Yeah, we speak against injustice, but we also have to have positive demands moving forward. So thanks everybody who submitted those. We are going to move on into our labor panel. So I'm going to call, Jerry is going to make a quick announcement first.
I thought it would be remiss, whether this is off the topic, but just let this talk,
just said it made me think about, we hear slanders of North Korea every day, but in the democratic people of North Korea, the tallest building in the country is the Children's Palace. Wow. It's a center for children to come to get all the skills that they need. And so remember that the next time you hear a slander and a war mongering against North Korea. We thought we'd be remiss if in this session, which is such a wonderful session attacking what capitalism has done to Detroit, if we didn't take stock of a couple of events that have occurred this week by the Trump administration and by the product of the Trump administration that we'd be remiss in addressing. First of all, we see this week Trump really announced a war and is sending troops to prevent migrants escaping from poverty, a poverty caused by U.S. imperialism in Honduras and all over Latin America, to declare war on these people. And our solidarity is with them, and we'll be prepared to go down there to defend them. Secondly, this week, Trump basically announced that transgender people no longer exist. The people whose understanding of their gender is based on what their real gender is and not the constraints of patriarchal capitalism no longer have the right to exist. And we stand with the transgender people who stand up to defend their right to exist and against all the attacks. Third, as read this week, the U.S. funds are funding bombing right now in the Gaza Strip and also scheduled to bomb Syria, where the war is over, but they can't accept the war is over. And we stand with the people there as well. And the flip side of that is we saw this week the product of the fascist rhetoric that comes from the Trump administration when 11 Jewish people were gunned down in a synagogue. So we just want to take a second to have a moment of silence for all these victims of our attack. And it's a silence to be with them, but it's also a vow of silence to struggle on their behalf.
Don't forget the people that got killed in Kroger's.
No question. Everywhere we see the murders that are going on, and we understand those murders are a product of the system that we described. So again, let's take a moment of silence for all these victims. Trump says, get back. We say, fight back.
Speaking of fight back, we're going to now have the labor panel up. Labor is always fighting back against the bosses when, if the union bureaucracy isn't actively collaborating with the bosses, of course. So I'm going to call up Aurora Harris, member of the Lecturers Union and Poet Laureate of Detroit, Karan Calhoun, a lead supervisor for DIS, D15, oh my gosh. Lead supervisor for D15. William M. Davis, president of DEREA, the Detroit Active and Retired Employees Association, as well as the police commissioner. Jackson Roberts, Moratorium Now Coalition. And Abayomi Ezekwe from the Moratorium Now Coalition as well. Those are all of our panelists for labor. I'll have Aurora Harris speak first. Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm a lecturer at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. And I'm with local, the LEO Lecturers Union, Lecturer Employee Organization Union, with the AFT Local 6244. For 8 months, we were in negotiations with President Schlitzow at the Ann Arbor U of M campus in the regions and the administration at Dearborn and Flint to get higher wages for our non-tenure track lecturers. The union is a member-driven union of non-tenure track lecturers. So I was asked to make a statement at the Dearborn campus to administration because we were fighting for equal pay. The Ann Arbor campus has always made double the amount of wages than the Dearborn and the Flint campuses. What I'm going to read to you is my statement that I read to the administration in Dearborn and partial statement in Ann Arbor to the regents and President Schlissel. I had to cut it in Ann Arbor because they only gave us 3 minutes to speak, while everyone else who was begging for millions of dollars to make changes on the Ann Arbor campuses were given, the okay to get their millions of dollars. $5 billion in the general fund of U of M, and they can't equalize our pay on 3 campuses. My name is Aurora Harris. I've been employed mostly as a part-time or less than part-time lecturer for a little over 5 years at the Dearborn campus. I live in Detroit, Michigan, with the high property taxes, car insurance rates, water rates, and foreclosure rates. When I'm underpaid, underemployed, and unemployed, as a rehumanizing act. I volunteer to deliver water to families that do not have water due to the water shutoff crisis in Detroit and the poison water in Flint, Michigan. Because of low wages and not knowing if I will be employed from one semester to the next, I often think about the possibility of my utilities and water being shut off, not being able to pay other bills, not being able to buy food or medicines I need, and the possibility of losing my home to foreclosure. I was hired in 2012. I'm a published, award-winning poet, a recorded spoken word artist. My book of poetry won the 2012 Penn Oakland Award for Excellence in Literature and is in the second print by Wayne State University Press. Other publications include academic journals, American and Asian American anthologies. I teach advanced composition, advanced creative writing, introduction to composition, introduction to literature with a focus on British and American authors, introduction to African American literature, and introduction to Africana studies. As an African American Filipina, I bring professional and diverse creative experiences to the classroom. I have served as an advisor to many students seeking to expand their writing careers. 4 of my former students are published and 1 entered into a Master of Fine Arts program in Chicago. I have deep ties to the city I live in and would love to continue teaching at this university, but my current situation is not sustainable. Last year, I was promoted and paid as a lecturer 2 at the Dearborn campus in literature, philosophy, and arts. I teach when courses are available to teach. I'm also paid as a lecturer 1 in African and African American studies when courses are available to teach. This means that even though I got a promotion to a higher level, depending on which department in the same college or any campus hires me, my title and my race doesn't follow me. They start me over as a lecturer introduction, like a new lecturer coming in at a level 1. So my pay is never the same wherever I go. 3 years ago, I taught 1 course at the Ann Arbor campus and was surprised to find I was paid more in Ann Arbor than Dearborn. This means unfair wages for the amount of work that goes into preparing to teach and teaching. There is no pay equity in the College of Arts, Sciences, and Letters at the Dearborn campus with respect to the title of lecturer, regardless of level, from one department or program to another, in addition to one campus to the next. I do not know if I will be employed from one semester to the next. My daily reality involves being forced to live at or below poverty levels without medical insurance at a moment's notice, and from one semester to the next, standing in food lines at local churches to receive a box of food, and trying to remain healthy enough to also take care of my great-nephew with autism. Last semester, I worked full-time with medical benefits. This semester, my teaching load is below half-time without medical benefits. I am teaching one regular paid course along with 2 independent study courses. Although the independent studies count for 3 credit hours each, and I meet with students once a week, I am only paid $300 per 3-hour course for a total of $600 for the entire semester for 2 students. So each student basically is worth $300. So if you take $300, divide that by 4, what is my pay? In January of this year, I was told that I would not be paid regular pay for independent studies courses. Although the independent study courses equal 6 credit hours, all 3 courses don't add up to 3/4 time of work effort that would allow me medical benefits. They said my independent studies classes are not counted as full classes, so I don't get full points. So they don't add up to 3 real classes. My work hours are considered extra effort, like extra points for teaching, even though I commit long hours to prepare syllabi and course materials and be available to teach and meet with students. In January 2018, I received a paycheck of $1,051.89. What was deposited into my account was $691.18 after taxes and other deductions. Because I had to wait over a month for the Ann Arbor office to send me my paperwork regarding the loss of medical benefits, I'm currently without medical and food benefits. I could not apply for Medicaid and food benefits without the proper paperwork from Ann Arbor. I received a medical insurance package from Ann Arbor on February 23rd, 2018. Because I'm below a half-time teaching status, the paper stated my medical benefit rate would be $695 per month if I kept the same insurance I had last semester at a cheaper rate. This means I would receive a paycheck of 0 had I gone with that medical benefit, because it's just about as much as they were paying me a month. As you can see, the insurance costs more than what I'm paid each month. The cheaper insurance rates will leave me with less than $100 a month to live on during the semester I work. Today, even if I receive the state of Michigan's Medicaid and food benefits, I'm still not paid enough to be able to pay the taxes on my home, utilities, phone bill, transportation, and other debts, such as paying back the university for an error they made last year that caused me to be paid for the entire semester twice. I do not own a car. For over 5 years, I've taken 2 buses to get to this campus to teach. For 5 years on low-time pay, I struggled to keep my home from being foreclosed on and becoming homeless. When tenured professors are not available to teach, other candidates are not qualified to teach. I'm a person that lets the departments or programs know I'm available to teach their courses. Usually I'm granted the courses. I appreciate my tenured colleagues and others that value me as a qualified person with the skills and abilities of a tenured professor to teach their courses. My reality is that while I'm considered or believed to be a capable professor, there is no pay equity when I teach their courses. And if I accept a course or courses, another tenured professor can take the course from me at a higher rate pay, and I would immediately be unemployed without medical benefits at a moment's notice. How would you feel and survive from day to day, being valued one moment while under threat of being devalued and unemployed at any time? Finally, last February, my niece suddenly passed away. I took 1 day off from teaching because I did not know I had 3 days for funeral leave. It took me more than 3 days to make funeral arrangements for my niece, notify relatives, explain to my great-nephew with autism that his mother passed away, deal with his depression, our grief, and grieving family members. The following month, I received a notice that because my great-nephew worked part-time and received a small death benefit from his mother, his disability check was reduced to $14 a month. Now, he's now 29 years old, and I've raised my nephew to have a good quality of life and be a viable person in society and stand up for his rights. But because he got a small little benefit, like $100 and something from the death benefit, they took his SSI down to $14 a month. Although I've shared my personal struggles and dehumanizing experiences, I sit before you without shame.
I request that you put yourself in my shoes and imagine living at a below poverty level this summer, all the challenges I face with a loved one with a disability, with economic challenges also. On behalf of all the lecturers, I ask that all topic areas of our Leo collective bargaining proposal that list changes regarding salary, appointments, layoff, recall benefits, DEI reviews, and faculty support, things that would improve our daily lives and show us that we are valued, be approved. Thank you.
That was jaw-dropping. Thank you, Aurora, for speaking to that. The more expensive college gets, the less they pay the teachers.
Makes no sense.
Okay, real quick.
Real quick, I just want to say that after we came out of bargaining in June, Ann Arbor's salary is $68,000 for full-time classes. In Dearborn, they pay us $39,000, and in Flint, they pay us $43,000. So we're still fighting at Dearborn and Flint to get equal pay across the board.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. Real quick, I also want to call to the front the representative from STEEP, or the Skilled Trade Enrollment Assistance Program. I know we had a representative who wanted to talk. I'll have you go after our last representative. Next, we're going to have Karan Calhoun, lead supervisor for D15. Thanks.
When I say when we fight, we win. 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 Thank you all. Just wanted to say, I'm glad to see everybody out here. I'm one of the lead supervisors of D15. As you know, we've been out here fighting, struggling, trying to get higher wages. Actually, not really the wages is important, it's the contracts. People have to have contracts to protect themselves and their families and their benefits. And I think all across the board, that's what's going on with a lot of jobs all over. People are not getting contracts. They don't want to reevaluate the contracts. They don't want to change the contracts. And then they half of them want to eliminate the contracts. So definitely that's why we out here fighting for the people that look just like you and I. But just to add to this, and you know, I'm not one of those long, storyboard type of people talking. One thing I figured out, and it didn't take long, and I'm real good at math, I know numbers, but math is not the problem. The problem is that we have to recognize that everybody is important. That's right. And I think a lot of times we get so stuck on what we doing versus what somebody else doing, we lose the lesson. And I'm gonna give you a little just personalized story from me. I would have never thought I would have got into a politic type of role. I was a young man, I owned a mortgage company for about 3-4 years, working with veterans. I was one of the top paid veteran mortgage refinancer and owner that probably did so many veteran homes throughout Michigan. They got me out here and sent me to Florida to run Florida. But that's one part. But see, the bottom line is that it wasn't the business, it's about where your heart is at. See, I work at D15 now, and we deal with fast food workers. But do you know, I'm out in the neighborhood, back and be with, talking to people that ain't got no job, they ain't working, trying to get them off of drugs, trying to motivate the young brother that don't want to do nothing. Say, hey man, listen, you got all this time, make use of it. You ain't doing nothing, make use of it so you can be, you know what I'm saying, basically playing your own part. So, like, to make it just clear, we have to understand that to win, we have to stop separating ourselves from one another. Low wages equals foreclosures. Low wages equals no pensions. Low wages equals no contracts. No wages equals shut-off. That means you can't pay your water. All of this is a revolving circle. And people need to get off the bandwagon. We shouldn't even be here talking to ourselves. Everybody in this room is standing up for what they believe. But see, the people in the room ain't the problem. It's the people we not talking to outside these doors that don't want to come here or you're passing something, they say, I'm straight, I'm straight. No, you're not straight. You're lying. You're lying. We're looking at the neighborhood. Nobody's straight. Now, you might drive a nice car, but at the end of the day, don't get mad if you're short on paying that insurance, because guess what? Insurance ain't going down, it's going up. And they still talking about, oh, we're going to make a contract and get insurance covered for the city of Detroit. Believe it, it ain't going to happen. Not going to happen. Never going to happen. So again, the answer to the problem is us. Let's not be afraid to support somebody that you don't know, or maybe you don't even believe in what they believe in. But we have to show the love. That's the way God told us to do each other. In order to know the love for somebody else, you got to know the love of God. That's the way you pass it around, folks. So put it in your book, put a little symbol next to it. This is the problem. And this is the only way it's going to stop, is that we come together and show them, show these rich politicians, these Republicans, these anti-people, show them that the people is running the show. So if you think gas is high, this is how you do it. This is how you really do it. If you think gas is high, send it around to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people and say, we ain't buying no gas today. Right. You know what I'm saying? They want to keep on making money off of on the water. How about everybody cut your water costs down halfway? Cut your heat half off. Suffer a little bit, but in the end, it'll show them that y'all not running us. We the ones that got you where you go, where you've been at, and we'll bring you back down to life. Amen, everybody.
Bill Davis from Doria.
Hello. Hello. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. As the young lady indicated, my name is William Davis. I'm the president of the Detroit Active Retired Employees Association. And I've been president for a while. We was born during the Detroit bankruptcy because there was other organized groups. But for whatever reason, it wasn't representing our interest. We have a problem in this city. We have a problem in this county. We have a problem in this state. Far too often you have people that's supposed to represent you, that may not truly represent you, that don't have your interests at heart. Detroit Active Retired Employees Association. We've been fighting for a while, and our motto is, we fight because we're right. We fight because we're right. We fight because we're right, ladies and gentlemen. So far too often, you could be right. And you think, well, it's not worth it. I'm not going to challenge. I'm going to go along, and hopefully I won't get blanked too much. Well, they're blanking. They've been blanking us. And part of our problem, far too often, is the fact that far too many of us are unwilling to step up and work with other people. We do more by organizing and making alliances. We do more by building bridges, not building walls. That's right. Far too many people think that, oh, well, that's a Jewish problem, or that's a Middle Eastern problem, or that's a gay problem, or that's a black problem, or that's a white problem. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, those are just means that they divide us. We cannot let people divide us that's harming us. But that happens. That continues to happen. They say, during the bankruptcy, they said, y'all can't appeal this. Y'all can't do this. I said, how in the blink can they say that to us? We cannot believe this. I don't believe this. And I didn't care for 10,000 people said we can't do it. We did. We appealed it. And we went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. But the main thing is the fact that you always have to fight. Far too often, too many of us are too willing to let a bully tell us something and afraid to stand up to it. You know, if you stand up to most voters, you might get your butt beat. So what? So what? So what? If you don't stand up, you're going to get your butt beat, you're going to get your lunch took, you're going to get everything took. You know, I had my pension cut. Thousands of people that work for the city of Detroit had their pensions cut. They didn't have to. They didn't have to. But, you know, you have these people to say they represent you, like the governor appointing an emergency manager. He wasn't representing us. He was representing the governor. The governor had a plan. You know, not only did he want to cut our pensions, which he did, and technically he wasn't supposed to, but you know, he wanted to take city assets. He wanted to weaken organized labor. And that's a big way to weaken organized labor. You take somebody's pension. You know, you take their cost of living. You cut their pension. You take away their health care. You know, so if you represent a demographic where you're mostly older and you take their health care, what are you trying to do?
Kill them. Yeah.
What are you trying to do?
Kill them.
What are you trying to do?
Kill them.
And you do what?
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Ladies and gentlemen, look around. We don't have to be the same color. We don't have to have the same sexual preference. We don't have to have the same religion. But we're people.
That's right. Yeah.
We have a duty and an obligation to fight for everyone.
That's right.
We may not be as strong as some. We may be a lot stronger than others. But by working together, we can make a difference. I urge you to stand up and do something for more than yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
We can. And we will. Have a good day. And as I usually say, no justice, no peace. Power to the people.
Power to the people.
All right, thank you so much, William Davis. Next we have Jackson, what is it, Roback? Jackson Roback from Moratorium Now Coalition.
Thank you so much for introducing me. I'm going to talk about Dan Gilbert and the other thugs that are trying to destroy Detroit. Criminals, thugs, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to go by basically a chronological order of what has happened. In 2012, the Detroit Water and Sewage Department was given $1.1 billion in bonds for infrastructure repair. $537 million of that went to termination fees for Chase Bank, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, and a various other amount of banks. Going on with that, with the emergency management that came in here, is when Illich started to buy up even more land, or Little Caesars nowadays. He bought 39 parcels of land for $1. $1. Not $10, not $100,000, $1. And now he's making billions off of it. And even with that, $450 million of bonds from the city was given to Illich and his company Olympia. He was given money on top of spending $1 for 39 parcels of land. And even more with that, the Michigan government is even aiding in this. Michigan lawmakers have created so-called Gilbert bills, giving the Gilbert Empire $1 billion in taxpayer funds for the Hudson site that has been considered a Brownville and other plan for development. He gets to keep $200 million, just straight government giving him $200 million, and over the next 20 years, $40 million in taxes will be paid from workers in those buildings. The workers in these buildings aren't paying the taxes to the government, aren't paying the taxes to the city, aren't paying the taxes to the county. It goes right to Gilbert's pocket. I don't know what corruption means to you, but what corruption means to me is when somebody can make money off of somebody for doing nothing at all. They're criminals, they're thugs. And now, Gilbert is worth $6.2 billion. He doesn't need this. He can pay out of pocket to build all these buildings. He doesn't need any assistance, but he gets more and more and more of it. And Duggan, aiding in this, has made Gilbert the head of the Blight and the Blight Removal Task Force. So they're putting him in charge of going after poor folk and taking their houses, taking away their water, doing whatever he wants to, working with the land bank and a triad of various criminal organizations working all together. And even back in 2008, which I'll bring this back to, Quicken Loans, Dan Gilbert's company, issued a lot of the subprime mortgages that helped bring down Detroit and around the country with the housing bubble. What he did was all of his subprime mortgages that he went to all these houses have since foreclosed 1,800 houses directly. 1,800. 52% of the houses that were given mortgages went and were foreclosed, and 52% of them are still abandoned and are still blighted. And even with that, in the first 24 to 36 months, it was 71% of these houses would be evicted and would be foreclosed. What I see in going on in Detroit, I will admit I'm not from Detroit. I'm from the burbs. I'm an average, white kid. But I will admit that I've come to see the problems in Detroit. Most white people look at Detroit as some exotic place. Oh, it's on the up and up. Dan Gilbert's coming to save the city. Did you see Little Caesars Arena? You want to go see a Pistons game? You want to go see a Red Wings game? They treat Detroit like it's some exotic thing that people aren't living here. It's a zoo for your entertainment. Shine Roller Detroit, selling their stuff. Detroit made, when we're treating Detroit like it's a commodity. Our system, in which our capitalist system that we're living in, will commodify everything. They will commodify you, they will commodify me, they've commodified the entire city of Detroit into a brand. They branded our city to make money off of it. You see Made in Detroit t-shirts being worn all around. They don't care about Detroit. They've never been to Detroit. They've never lived in Detroit. But they say, oh, I'm a Detroiter. I remember my dad brought me to a Kid Rock concert, gross, I will admit, back when I was 12 years old. And he said, I'm a proud Detroiter. I'm like, you're not from Detroit. You live right down the road in Clarkston. You live in a lake house. What do you mean you're a Detroiter? And he says, aren't we all proud Detroiters here? And everyone cheers. And I'm like, maybe one person here, maybe two people here are from Detroit, but most of you aren't. Don't act as if you are a Detroiter when you've never been through the struggle. You don't see the struggle of all these people. You've never had your water shut off. And it's sickening to me, the blatant ignorance so many people have. So many people have ignorance to the struggle in Detroit. When I talk about what I do, I talk with my friends and I say, oh yeah, I come down every Monday and go to Moratorium Now meetings so I can get caught up with the struggle. And they say, wait, there's issues in Detroit? I thought it was just crime. And the race will get thrown in it, and they'll say classic racist stuff. Oh, Detroit got destroyed because of lazy black people. Detroit got destroyed because they're all criminals down there. And I look at them and I say, have you not seen what corporations have done to Detroit? Corporations are the reason why all the factories got moved out. They blame Mexicans for that. They blame the Chinese for that. When it's the corporations themselves wanting to make money. If corporations cared about you and me, if GM cared about you and me, if Chrysler or Ford or any of them cared about us, there'd still be jobs in Detroit. The automotive industry would have never crashed in Detroit. They just want to make money. That's their goal. And you can vote for whoever you want to vote for. But the main people still supported this. The main politicians have always supported this. And I just wish for everyone to realize that corporations, no matter how much of a friendly smile they put on their face, they're not your friend. They don't care about you and me. If they could make an extra dime by firing me and hiring someone else, they would. If they could make an extra $10 by destroying a plant and sending it to Mexico, they would. I just think that everyone, I'm actually very proud to see how many people are here. I'm very proud that everyone wants to become aware of the struggle. And I'm just happy with all of this, mainly because I want to see a day where there aren't this massive amount of foreclosures. I know that day's a long day away. And I just want to see a day where everyone can be free of this pain and this struggle. And I think we can do that if we all unite together, no matter, as Bill was saying earlier, we don't need to worry about if you're black or if you're white. We don't need to worry about if you're poor. Everyone who is of working class is a member of the struggle. Everyone who is a worker is a member of the struggle against the capitalist system. Every single person who is a worker has been exploited by the system. We don't get the full value of our labor. We have it taken away, and get our money given to CEOs that don't need it. They get our money sent to CEOs that don't need it. They should be making millions of dollars. I got a minute left, so I just want to say thank you for letting me speak. This is my first time speaking, so thank you so much. Thank you. All the people. All the people.
Amen. Real briefly, we're going to have Katana up from STEEP. That is the Skilled Trade Enrollment Assistance Program. Thank you.
Well, since I'm in the sanctuary, I'm going to say praise the Lord to everyone. I'm also going to say thank you for the pastor that's allowing us to come into this sanctuary today, as well as this coalition for allowing me to come before you. Right now, I'm standing on behalf of the STEEP program, that is the Skilled Trade Enrollment Assistance Program. My son is the one who is over this program. He's an iron worker, and this program, this is the 3rd year. They're a nonprofit organization, and I want to give a shout out to BMO, the Better Man Outreach as well. They also started out in Congregations Allowed Them. This is their first year that Wayne County Community College is allowing them to have this program established as a curriculum there. I'm asking for everyone who are thinking about having a skill, no matter what the skill may be. It doesn't matter, they're talking about breaking barriers. It doesn't matter if you have a situation. It's not just for people who have felonies, but if you know someone that does have a felony, it won't stop them from being able to gain employment or a skill. So we will be having brochures in the back. I'm not going to be before you long. Think about it. It's $30 plus an hour. And no matter what your situation is, they're willing to work with you to bring your skills up to the level where you will be able to pass this test. God bless you all for coming out and fighting for the causes of the people, because these are just the topics that are being brought before the people to break down barriers for us to be able to have a living wage. So God bless you all for coming out. And thank you again for allowing me to come before you.
Thank you so much, Katana. Before we have Abayomi.
Okay, I went to trade school this year, and I got a job after 1 month of trade school. Of course, I finished out the 9-month program and left for a higher paying job. So anybody right now who's looking to change career or do something, now is the time right now.
That's right.
Thank you, Tyler. Before we have Abayomi and Zikwe close it out, we just want to give a shout out to Richard Mack, who's a labor candidate for the Charter Commission over there in the back. Hello. You know, Elena Murata earlier mentioned Gilbert's picks for the Charter Commission. Richard Mack, not a Gilbert pick. Vote for him. All right. Labor pick. Sorry, I'm so sorry. All right, we're going to have Abayomi and Zikwe close it out for us.
Thank you so much, Adele. And I want to first of all thank everybody for coming out today on such a rainy Sunday afternoon. And of course, it's really been a pleasure to be here. This is being streamed. And of course, it's going to be available. You can share it through social media so more people will be able to partake in this. I just want to make a few concluding remarks. I have about 3 different points that I want to make. But we have to recognize that the hatred and the bigotry and the racism and the classism that's being fostered right now in the United States is coming from the top. It's coming from Wall Street. It's coming from the 1%, the ruling interests, the billionaires who are running this country, who control not only the federal government, but the state, as well as the county and the local municipalities as well. And we saw just over the last week, as Jerry mentioned, in addition to the massacre that occurred yesterday at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, we had these pipe bombs, 12 of them that were sent out to people, leading Democratic Party people, 2 former U.S. presidents, Robert De Niro, who's a leading actor, cultural worker in this country. And I don't think this is an accident. Whether those bombs were potentially explosive or not is really not the issue. They were sent as a means of terrorizing people into submission here in the United States. And I don't believe it was just that one guy in Florida, whether he did it or not, if he was put up to do it by someone else who really pulls the strings in this country, is something we need to think about. We also need to think about the 2 African Americans who were killed outside of Louisville, Kentucky. White guy walks into Kroger's. He had tried to get into an African American church prior to him going to Kroger's. He couldn't get in, thank God. He couldn't get in. He goes to Kroger. He walks up behind a 60-plus-year-old African-American man, shoots him right in the back of the head. He falls down, he's shot multiple times. He goes out into the parking lot and kills an African-American woman, a senior citizen as well. So this is the atmosphere that we're living in right now in the United States. What I want to talk about, I want to make basically 3 points. And this is from an article that I published just this past week in Fighting Words. It's a newly launched Detroit-based Marxist journal. The editor, Chris Amell, was here earlier. She had to leave, I guess. But you can look this up. There are hard copies of this article on the table, the sign-in table in the back. But I start out talking about the Unite Here Local 24 strike. This goes to the heart of the struggle that's taking place here in the city of Detroit. Here you have Marriott International, the wealthiest hotel chain in the world. That's right. They opened up the Westin Book Cadillac a decade ago during the height of the Great Recession, the worst economic decline since the Great Depression of the 1930s. They opened it up. The workers took concessions. And what they told me, we've been going down there helping them picket, and we'll be going down there after we leave here, right after I speak. We want people to gather up, and we're going to caravan to go down to the Westin Book Cadillac Hotel to join those workers on the picket line who are demanding that one job should be enough. But those workers, they're striking in 8 different locations throughout the United States, about 7,700 employees, as I mentioned, of the world's largest hotel chains. And what are they asking for? A little over $2 more per hour. $2 more per hour. They want some influence over the technological changes that are taking place in the corporations so they can maintain their jobs. And they want temporary workers slated to become permanent employees in the corporation. Doesn't sound like a whole lot that multi-billion-dollar corporations could grant. So this is the struggle that we're waging right now here in the city of Detroit. They tell us Detroit is booming. The Detroit is on the comeback. Yet, people are poor, the rich are getting richer, the working class people are becoming more and more exploited and oppressed. They're taking our money, our tax dollars that should go to support our schools, that should go to support public services, the public libraries, and turning those funds over to multi-billionaires like Dan Gilbert and Illich Holdings. This is totally outrageous, absolutely outrageous. According to an article, and I quote this in this report, that was published by CNBC Network, which is a pro-corporate network. They're not friends of the working people. And what did they say in July? They said that, quote, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, at least in the United States. This is the ruling class themselves talking. The top 1% of families took home an average of 26 times as much income as the bottom 99% in 2015. According to a new paper released by the Economic Policy Institute, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank based in Washington, D.C. This has increased since 2013, showing that income inequality has risen in nearly every state, unquote. Demands for higher wages among service employees have been taking place now for the last 5 years. The Fight for 15 campaign, which we heard about in Michigan, recently staged a series of demonstrations on October 2nd in conjunction with other workers across the country. This is a nationwide movement. Members of the Fight 15 in Detroit blocked traffic along Woodward Avenue earlier this month. It led to over 20 arrests. Earlier that day in Flint, somebody driving a vehicle struck the crowd of marchers where 8 people went to the hospital. The authorities said it was an accident. We really don't know. And then we have the water shutoffs, which we talked about earlier as well. Thousands upon thousands of people are having their essential services terminated, sometimes for less than $150. This is totally outrageous. It's a violation of human rights. The Great Lakes Water Authority was also illegally established in 2014 during emergency management and bankruptcy. Absent of any public debate, without any referendum, before the people here in the city of Detroit, they just essentially regionalized our water systems. These are decisions made by the bank-led emergency management officials, and also they made a decision to disconnect tens of thousands of households' water resources as well. We have gentrification that's running amok here in the city of Detroit. A good example is right here in the downtown area at the Park Avenue House Apartments, where the residents there was given a 30-day notice to quit, saying that there were new owners of the building. And the Detroit Free Press did an investigation, and they found no record of any sale taking place of that particular structure. This is one of the few reasonable places to live in terms of rents in the downtown area. Rents are going up enormously throughout not only downtown and midtown, but all across the city of Detroit. Rents are going up exponentially. So it's a concerted campaign, in our opinion, to drive the majority African American, working class, and impoverished population out of the city of Detroit. Jonathan talked about earlier. 1,000 owner-occupied homes were put up for sale in an auction, which takes place every September and October. People need a place to live, but they'd rather throw them out in the streets and allow these so-called developers to buy up these homes, and they do nothing with them. They let them rot, or else they sell them back to people on land contracts, which in many cases have liens on the properties, and people wind up losing them because they cannot pay delinquent property taxes and other liens that are on the home. So in concluding, I would just like to say, this Moratorium Now event has emphasized the need for mass mobilization and organization of the people to fight against the racist, anti-worker policies of those currently running the city of Detroit. Now, after the teach-in, I'm saying again, participants will demonstrate outside the Western Brook Cadillac Hotel, not only in solidarity with the Unite Here Local 24 workers who have been out for 3 weeks today. They've been off work. But also against this City Lab conference, which was moved from the Western Brook Cadillac Hotel because of the strike. And we want to salute the Unite Here people for sparking them to move. They moved over to the Renaissance Center. But at the same time, they don't represent us. Who's speaking there? Mary Barr, the CEO of General Motors. Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire former mayor of New York City, who is part of the Bloomberg Fortune, the publication network, and they're very, very wealthy people. And other representatives of the ruling class. It's an invitation-only conference.
Yes.
And they want to teach us and tell us what should be done here in the city of Detroit. This City Lab project has gone all over the world. They've had conferences in Europe, and they've had them here in the United States. They talk about urbanism. What does that mean? It's another code word for urban removal, which is Negro removal, as they called it back in the 1950s and 1960s. They cleared out Black Bottom. They cleared out Paradise Valley. They cleared out the old west side of Detroit. And it's clearing out the entire city of Detroit right now.
Say that.
Now, whether the strike is settled in the next week, which the workers have told me they may be out for another week or more, it's almost a secondary issue if you think about it. The contradictions developing in the city of Detroit and around the United States will continue to result in the widening gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And what we're saying is, only a fundamental transformation of the political and the economic system in the United States can alter the current social situation. This desperately needed change must be initiated by those of us who are most impacted by these problems, which face ever-growing numbers of people inside this country. Thank you so much for listening. This article was published in Fighting Words. You can pick up copies on the back. You can also look up Fighting Words at Fighting Words, fighting-words-net website. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody who was able to go down to Washington Boulevard in Michigan, we're going to be gathering right here in the back. And please join us. We're going to caravan down to the hotel. We have signs, and we want to pick it right alongside the United Here Hospitality Workers Union. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much to all the speakers. All the power to all the people.